Hey there, MSPs and IT pros. Welcome to the Rocket MSP podcast, the show where we ask the tough questions. Today's episode is sponsored by Comet Backup. You can learn more about them in the show's description. My guest today is Matt Holland, CEO of Field Effect. Matt, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent. And apparently I've got this open in another tab. So now I'm hearing our there we go. So I'm doing really well, man. I'm so glad to have you on here because I've got to say, Field Effect is one of those companies that it's been on the list, but I never knew who to contact. So I'm glad we were able to connect.
Yeah, me too. Happy to be here. Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about some cybersecurity stuff, because that's kind of your specialty, right?
Yeah, it's basically all I've done my entire adult life. So, yeah.
Now, before we dive in, because I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask you. Before we dive into all of that, I would love to just get to know you better.
Sure.
Can you give us some background? I know you told me some things off air, so whatever you're comfortable sharing with everyone, especially if you know anything about like where the aliens are kept or any of the. I know you cyber guys. You know where all the secrets are, right? So fill us in. Tell me what you got.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I started my career at Communications Security Establishment, which is the Canadian version of the NSA, albeit a little bit smaller. Back in 2000, I was there for 7 years. I got to work on really pointy edge of or end of the spear type of technology. So things that unfortunately I can't talk about, but I got to be exposed to techniques, approaches that really laid the groundwork for how I approach cybersecurity even to this day. In 2007, I co-founded an intelligence tradecraft company, which, for all intents and purposes, was a privatized intelligence company that produced technology to help Five Eyes intelligence agencies with their mission. And I ended up selling that along the way to L3 Harris. But before doing that, co-founded Field Effect, and Field Effect is a company that has built a holistic cybersecurity stack. We offer it in the form of a very advanced MDR services to SME because it's clearly small to medium businesses have been historically not focused on by the cybersecurity industry, and we felt it was a big opportunity to help and start a new mission. So, I've been doing this for 23 years. I absolutely love it. I'm passionate about it. My wife would probably agree. It's the only thing I'm actually good at, and I intend on doing it for a very long time.
Well, very cool. I'm so glad to have you on here today. So let's dive into some questions to help MSPs. So many MSPs rely on like a patchwork of security tools that often leave gaps in the cybersecurity, just overall cybersecurity. I'll call it health. Okay.
Mhm.
So what's driving the need for a more holistic approach?
I think the biggest thing is that at this stage and the type of attackers that MSPs face, that approach to have the separate systems, it just doesn't work anymore. I like to call it the Swiss cheese approach, and while it's great on a burger, it tends to lead to ransomware businesses. And with cybersecurity, a core tenet is visibility. If you do not have visibility over your IT assets, your people, your networks, then at the end of the day, somebody is going to get in and they're going to do something that you won't like. Ransomware attack, financial redirection attack. And I think MSPs are starting to realize that, for their well-being, their customers' well-being, that they have to adopt more of a holistic approach that gives them the visibility across all of their customers' assets.
And would you say that today's threats are different than what MSPs faced like 5 years ago?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's gotten, I would say, considerably more wild, wild west out there. It's when you look back to, I think, what has caused that, the renaissance of or the emergence of modern ransomware kind of started when the shadow brokers leak occurred. So MSPs are now up against intelligence grade techniques due to those leaks back in 2016. That means that literally they have to defend against what used to be nation state level technology. We see a lot of living off the land techniques as well. So attacks that don't require actually installing any malware, attackers will come in and make use of the features and the technology that exists on the host itself, and that's a very difficult thing to detect. The pandemic also changed things considerably. Um, the world of people going to remote offices or working from home really led to a transformation of having to stress remote management of all customers, and that required a transition in technology. And a lot of the old technology that was used didn't get deprecated, so things like credential leaks or allow utilization of that old technology in a way that an attacker can go after your customers. And I think the volume has changed quite a bit as well. We're now in a place where, as opposed to the occasional attack against a small to medium business, it is a constant barrage. So it's not whether and if, it's just how frequently is it going to happen. And ultimately, that has led to the expectation that MSPs are going to solve the cybersecurity problem. So there's a lot more focus on MSPs to address this issue. And I think 5 years ago, it wasn't quite that level of expectation.
Now, I know that a problem that many MSPs face is we're still using tactics that are 5 years old or even 10 years old. A lot of MSPs, especially the smaller ones, that let's be honest, they maybe don't know what they're doing as well as some of the larger, more established guys. Um, they don't even know what terms like "live off the land" mean. So, why don't we start there? Can you explain that uh, definition for me and kind of what that is?
Sure. So a traditional attack that doesn't include that approach, you would install, gain some sort of execution on a host, and then you would install malware, and that malware might be ransomware, it might be a virus, but it's a unique program that does not exist on the computer prior to that attack. It's something that the attackers put down. Traditionally, this has been the point where antivirus software or other type of endpoint technology would detect and say, okay, that doesn't belong here, or that looks malicious, and that's what they would clean up. Now, in the case of living off the land, there is nothing being dropped by the attacker. They gain execution in some way, perhaps through a remote console or an RDP instance, and then can utilize the tools that are built into the operating system to perform their attack. And that leaves a much smaller surface of detection for cybersecurity software to say, okay, that doesn't belong here. It comes down to what are the heuristics around the program being run, sometimes Python, sometimes PowerShell. And it's a much more challenging thing to detect, because oftentimes that approach of living off the land looks like an administrator doing what they do. So it's a much
Okay.
more challenging thing to identify.
So, besides living off the land, what are some of the biggest vulnerabilities or blind spots that MSPs have using a fragmented security setup?
Um, Most often we see RDP being the point of attack. That's something that MSPs will utilize in order to manage their customers. If you're an MSP and you have 100 customers, obviously you're not going on site every day or periodically, so you utilize something like remote desktop. And if your credentials are leaked and an attacker finds those credentials, they can utilize that same approach to get into a system. Now, the challenge there is if you are not running something like a network sensor, identifying RDP attacks becomes much more difficult. Some endpoints can pick it up, but oftentimes, doesn't always happen. So the blind spot on the network is something that is something we see pretty often that MSPs may not configure. Um, the other thing I think is the blind faith in technology solving the problem. And from a risk standpoint, when you're going out and building a custom stack, it's not uncommon to choose something that Gartner says is the best, and what's the phrase? Nobody ever gets fired for buying something that Gartner says is good. But in reality, there's a difference between buying the technology and having the team to use it. And the lack of emphasis on that managed piece with the people using the technology is something that I would consider a blind spot as well. Ultimately, you need something that includes solid people, really good processes, and really good technology. That is the equation for an amazing cybersecurity implementation.
Well, and it sounds like you kind of answered my next question a little bit. So, how does a holistic system consolidate and integrate key capabilities like endpoint, network, and cloud security? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a a little bit more than a passion project.
Hmm.
It's what we do here at Field Effect, and I think out of the gate, this is a bit of a long answer. People often mischaracterize holistic cybersecurity as just XDR because it is perceived as being a layer on top of different types of technology. In reality, a truly holistic system is considerably more than that, and I would argue that it is as much a philosophy as it is a technology stack. It is the idea of looking at the internal threats and the external threats. What's happening in the world ahead of an attack before somebody attacks you. Is somebody registering a domain that looks like yours before they do a phishing attack? Um, it includes looking at people and protecting people and training people and understanding how people are a threat to a business, and ultimately improving the overall business in regards to resiliency. Um, the concept of threat surface is often something that doesn't get a lot of focus, and that is a really big piece of holistic cybersecurity. What that means is it's not just installing software and having a team of people behind it. It is constantly improving your network, finding vulnerabilities, saying this is a problem, you need to fix it. And over time, the holistic approach actually makes businesses stronger and more resilient to attacks. Um, and then there's the whole concept of, how do you integrate as many sensors as possible into one holistic system? So is there, a DNS firewall or email protection, internal threat scanning, external threats scanning, and just really understanding what the actual I guess, business is that you need to protect. And I think that's the difference between XDR and holistic. It is you look at it the way an attacker would look at it and defend with that same level of breadth.
So, I'm gonna go off script a little bit here. Right now, there are so many cybersecurity startups and big players. We'll just mention Field Effect, and then there's you mentioned RDP earlier. So there's companies like TrueGrid who provide secure RDP. There's new like I'll call them all-in-one cybersecurity suites. We are inundated with platforms, and it makes it really difficult, especially for MSPs that almost have like decision paralysis, right? They're afraid to pick the wrong one, so they just don't pick, or they think, unfortunately, they think that, oh, if I sign up for this platform, they say they're an all-in-one cybersecurity suite, so this is the only thing I need for my clients, when in fact it's not. and and we don't even have to go into all of that, okay? So I guess what I want to say is, one, do you consider Field Effect to be like the only thing an MSP needs for cybersecurity? And two, why not?
I don't know how to answer that. Well, I mean, yes, the only straight up, Field Effect is the most complete platform there is. What we try to do is actually solve the problem for MSPs and businesses and make it simpler. So the tool hell that you just described, like we see it all the time, and every time we see it, it reminds us that, yeah, what we've been spending a decade building actually is exactly what the MSP space needs. Whether they're stuck in decision paralysis, or tired of alert fatigue, or are just paying way too much for a stack of tools. Like this is why we're here. This is what gets us jazzed. The only thing we don't really get into is firewalls. There's lots of firewall vendors. That's just not a space we cover. But the whole gamut of what an MSP would need, yeah, that's what we do. Like we've been building this for a decade. It is based on a background in intelligence, from both the offensive side and the defensive side. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what more I can say other than I think we're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then let me dig into this a little deeper. Um, you say that you think for the most part, field effect checks off all the boxes for MSPs when it comes to cybersecurity. Uh, More mature MSPs are implementing controls or frameworks, whether that's CIS, NIST, whatever. Right? There's a bunch of them out there, and then some of the clients have to adhere to regulations like HIPAA. Right? So, um, have you guys like aligned your product with any controls or frameworks to show like, hey, here's how we check off all the boxes?
Yes, so that is something we've put a lot of time into the last 18 months, because we received, what you're characterizing is something we've been hearing for a while. That, all right, if your solution is what you say it is, how does it line up with these frameworks? So the solution will actually identify, this is where you're where you're compliant, this is where you're not compliant, and then on top of that we have a security services team that will actually work with the MSP or the end customer, if that's desired, in order to update their system to become compliant with those specific frameworks. From our perspective, supporting that whole migration into compliance it's imperative. That's where the world is going. So for us, it's just another dimension to what we're offering.
And that's one of the things that I think is kind of a pro and a con. These controls and frameworks. Now that's just another thing that vendors are. It's almost like AI, where vendors are like, let's bolt this on after the fact.
Yeah.
But it sounds like thankfully you've got the right background, where I think you took the right approach and kind of built your product almost around those frameworks and controls, and then figured out how to check off the boxes with the product. If that make Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And we approach it from the world of simplicity. We're not a company that will say. Let me rephrase that. We're not a company that spends more time telling you how smart we are than actually helping you. We want to
Mm.
bring simplicity and make the problem go away, and whatever that looks like for you is what we get excited about. So, we're one of these weird companies that we're interested in a 20-year, 30-year relationship with our partners, not just to make some money off an MSP and then wish you good luck.
Now that's really interesting that you say that, because let's be honest, in the MSP, I don't know, the culture right now with vendors is, let's get that 3-year contract. Let's make the books look good, so that way we can sell or IPO or whatever. The business has financial goals, and I get it. You're in business to make money. You're not a nonprofit, so I get it. You got financial goals, but it's almost like the um, the service that's being provided to the MSP is almost like secondary to the contracts and the financial goals. So, what are you doing uh, about that? What are you doing differently around that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you just said there, and we've over the years we've definitely had the feedback of, can you make it simpler? And that's the approach that we really take now. Is if want to try the tool out as an MSP, you can try it out for free. We have such confidence in what we are selling, in the relationship that we will build with you, that you can try Covalence out for free. We'll set you up, give it a shot, learn the team, learn what is different about what we bring. And then, there's obviously incentives for signing a 3-year deal. But if month to month is what you prefer, we have a lot of confidence in what we're doing. We would rather customers stay with us because they love working with us than feel like they're forced to remain in a relationship. And I think that's a philosophical approach that just makes sense for the MSP space.
Well, from MSPs everywhere, thank you for that. I, I appreciate that approach. I've often felt that your service or products should speak for themselves, and if somebody doesn't like what you're doing, they should be able to take their ball and go home.
Yeah, 100%.
So I appreciate that you feel the same way. So let's talk more about your product a little bit. How does automation and analytics provide an advantage over the traditional tools?
Um, so the a really good model is not easy to come by. You don't just layer some technologies together and get there. A really good model should take into consideration that there's time for AI, there's time for humans, there's time for a script to do the job, or some measure of analytics. And I think the advantage of what we've done is we've got a nice blend of when to bring people in and when to let the tools do the job, and we forward load as much of the decision making as possible. One unique thing about Field Effect is we don't, because we can put an appliance on site on customers if that's what you choose. Customers have the option to say, okay, I don't want my data to leave my network, and that,
Mm.
from a privacy standpoint, is absolutely enormous. You don't have to go that route if you don't want, but the model scales to taking that into consideration. And ultimately, from our perspective, how good the system works comes down to how much we empower our operators, what's the reaction time, and what's the certainty of what we're doing to ensure that we're not delivering false positives to customers. That is a core tenet of Field Effect. Is a false positive is a sin, and if you ever send a false positive through, then I don't want to say we flog you internally, but there's a measure of professional shaming. Not really, but you get my joke.
No, I like it though. I mean that false positives suck, man, and so does the alert fatigue
Yeah,
that we get from all these different platforms. But you know what else sucks? Not getting any alerts and assuming that means nothing's wrong.
yeah,
So what are you doing around that? Like how do we know that the product is working?
yeah. So the way we communicate with MSPs and customers in general, we were talking about this off air, is what's called an arrow. It stands for an action, recommendation, and observation, and this is a very refined, polished structure to say, this is what happened, or this is what we've observed, or this is what we'd recommend, and these are the things you need to do. In our portal, you can then ask for help and engage with the team. You're not dealing with logs or anything like that. Now, if you ever want to go deeper, we have the Covalence dashboard, which allows you to go in and look at all the data that the system is seeing. So if you want to see that stream of logs, we're fully transparent. We'll open that up, and you can look at it. But what we have observed is once you come to trust the company and the system, the interest in that data tends to go away, but it's always there if you need it. So that's a kind of a hybrid approach of not wasting your time, but if you want to dig deeper, you can.
All right. Now, what what customer experience improvements can MSPs expect by working with Field Effect versus some of these other platforms?
Hmm. Um, I think the most impactful is right out of the gates. We focus on reducing the threat surface for your customers. Threat surface is a really important starting point because it is directly connected to everything that happens from a point in time. So if you can reduce the threat surface, we work with you to say, okay, these are the problems we observe and these are the things we'd recommend. If you can reduce that threat surface, that has the carry-on effect of a customer being more secure, and that translating into less work because there's less attacks that will get potentially further on. So from a customer experience standpoint, your life will get easier. And ultimately, the more we can keep you to the left of the boom, the whole left of boom, right of boom. Ideally, boom never happens, but what you do left of boom really dictates how easy your experience is, and what your customer experience is, and what your experience is as a partner with us. I think that is a philosophical difference maker that we take into every relationship, and I would say the more a partner embraces that, the long term gets even easier.
Now, I know boom is um, the I don't know, the attack or the breach or whatever you want to call it, right? And I understand left of boom is pre, right of broom is boom is post. Does boom actually stand for something, or is it just like an explosion because that's what it feels like?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's when shit hits the fan on a network, and you now need to jump into action. So yeah, an attack happening. Yeah.
I just thought I'd ask the dumb question. I don't know if anyone else wonders this stuff or if it's just me. Um, all right, so we talked a little bit about the automation and analytics providing the advantage. What efficiencies can MSPs gain from the approach that you guys are offering compared to managing multiple consoles?
Yeah. So it all comes down to effort and odds of success. So if you were cobbling together a solution that you bring to customers that includes several tools, there is an effort penalty that goes into managing those all at once. Best case, you've wrapped it in some sort of single pane of glass. Typically, that is not necessarily within the resource reach of most MSPs. So the advantage of taking this disparate set of tools and replacing it with one pane of glass that is actually holistic and does the job and better of all of those layers, right out of the gate, that allows you to do more with less. So that means if you have, really talented cybersecurity engineers, you can probably have them focus on more moneymakers for your company, and actually have a group of people that are of a lower, I guess, technical understanding in order to work with us. So right out of the gate, there's the ability to do more with the company, and then as you grow your customer base, you don't need to hire additional engineers because of the efficiencies you have by using our platform and engaging with our teams. It cannot be understated enough, or should not be understated that you know when you work with Field Effect, the amount of things you need to look into, it's very much curated by Field Effect, and if you don't hear from us unless there is a problem. And that is, I don't want to anger the cybersecurity gods, but we've had a tremendous amount of success over the years, and that is in large part due to how the holistic nature of the product, how well it works, how good the team is, and we get jazzed by um, making MSPs as effective as possible and helping you guys make as much money as possible.
Awesome. Now, how does the reduced complexity that you're providing to MSPs translate into higher profitability? Because I assume there's a premium that the MSPs are paying for working with such a fantastic product like yours versus what they would be spending with some of these other hodgepodge you know, put a few things together to try and accomplish the same thing type of solution.
Um, this may surprise you, but it's actually the opposite. So one of the things when you get covalence, you will notice out of the gate that you will save money based on your technology stack right out of the gate. So if we replace 10 tools, you're probably paying a particular fee for each of those 10 tools. You pay one fee with Field Effect, which reduces with the more volume that you do with us, the more business you bring our way. So it really depends on what an MSP currently has, but it is not uncommon for us to save your cost by 50 to 60%. Now, what you choose to charge your customers is entirely up to you. But that, by adopting Field Effect, that is all your margin. Your life gets easier, and you can get more margin in the process. So that's I always get excited when I go to one of the conferences and have a discussion and talk about people's tool sets and hear what they're paying for it. The reaction of, okay, well, right out of the gate with a 250 person license, you're going to be saving um, you know 60-70% of your costs. That is an eye opener for MSPs, and it's really neat to be able to unlock for MSPs. And on top of that, you get the experience that dealing with the company that I talked about. Like it's a better experience. You're made more efficient. Your team can do more. So the tail end of profitability just goes up.
Now, I'm sure by now everyone here has heard of Channel Program. So they have a couple of things. One, they've got Navistack, where MSPs can pop on and take a look, uh, take a really cool approach of like, I don't know, fill in the blanks, almost like Mad Libs here. Just put in whatever tools you're using, and it so when you look at something like Navistack, are they putting Field Effect in for like 6 or 7 different cybersecurity related things because you guys are just checking off so many boxes?
I don't know if they evaluate us actually. I've not heard of that platform, so my ignorance may be exposed with that question. But
It's okay. I know that, even if you as a vendor are not necessarily, uh, paying Channel Program for anything, I believe if enough MSPs are using your platform, they'll just include it in the list for
okay.
simplicity's sake, so
I expect there's probably 80 people messaging me right now saying we actually agreed to that. But yeah.
yeah. So, and then another thing that they have is a technology map. Um, and I'll be honest, this map, I'm going to share my screen because I think this map is cool and makes my brain hurt all at the same time. So let me share this. So look at all these things, right? I'm sure you're on here somewhere.
I can't see your screen.
Oh, I sorry, I got to hit add to stage. There we go.
Yes.
I, and I'm serious. I'm sure you're on here somewhere. But this is what I meant earlier when I said there's just so many tools. And unfortunately, cybersecurity all just kind of gets lumped up together, right?
Yeah.
So Sophos, I mean, they do a lot, right? They've got, firewalls and endpoint, and I think they've even got like email and so many other things, right? While oh, let's pick another one here. Scout DNS doesn't do all of that stuff. I almost wish that they would like split this up into, I don't know, like subcategories of cybersecurity, because this alone makes me feel like paralysis of just looking at this.
Mhm.
So, with that said, since there are so many different types of cybersecurity platforms out there, let me ask you about different types of cybersecurity like services
Mhm.
and just see if you guys are doing this. Are you doing anything with DNS filtering, or do we need
Um,
to if we have field effect?
Yeah, so we have what's called a DNS firewall, which essentially does the same thing. So what that allows you to do is control what DNS lookups will succeed and which ones will be blocked. And we have this in both what we call like an office version. So if you have an on-prem office or in a roaming case. So we built the roaming DNS firewall when the pandemic started. So if you were, your company turned into an entire work from home scenario and you like to go and work at a coffee shop, If you were at home connected to the VPN, that's one type of behavior that you can expect. But if you go to a coffee shop, the roaming DNS firewall will act more aggressively. And this is actually one of the most effective ways to block attacks, because often attackers will come in with a multiple staged approach. Each stage typically calls down and gets another piece. So by utilizing this, it's really great for attack chain disruption.
Very cool. Let's look at Total is another one on here. Now they are what's the right term for that? SASE, I think. They basically do it's like a VPN for individual computers to get into the network, but better than a VPN. I don't really understand because I'm a little. I'll be honest. I'm a little outside of my field of expertise once I start talking about what some of these tools do. But when it comes to connecting to a network securely, that's not something that you guys do, right?
No, and the reason for that is often businesses will, they'll prefer their own approach to connectivity, and sometimes telcos will get involved, and we focus more on monitoring of the network and looking for suspicious things, utilizing machine learning where it makes sense to look for anomalies, and introducing humans where it makes sense. And from a value standpoint, that is our interpreted sweet spot, not necessarily dictating what your topology needs to look like. That's in our nobody likes to be told specifically how to build a network, and we find we bring much more value by arriving and saying, okay, we'll protect whatever you have.
I like that approach. Let's look at Fin Security, fantastic company that provides cybersecurity awareness training. You don't do that, right?
We do that.
You do it.
We
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we this the holistic approach. We started on a product in 2009 called Cyber Range, and I actually think it's the best cyber range in the world. I'm just going to say that. But what it does is it allows us to simulate anything from simple environments to complex environments, and simulate that in multiple instances. So you can take a class of 20 people, do things like wargaming, red versus blue exercises, all the way to courses on how to use Python and labs around that. So one of the things that we're really excited to actually roll out is formalized MSP training in realistically early 2024 at this point. But there's a set of curriculum that if you're a field effect customer and you're an MSP, then there's a set of training that will be available to you to help train your staff to be better at defending customers. Typically, this is something that is quite a costly thing to send your people to various training courses and whatnot. And this is just something we're going to offer because, again, we're interested in very long-term relationships and long-term partnerships.
That is so cool, man. I'll pick one more. Threat Locker. Are you familiar with them? They are a everything's blacklisted except for what you've whitelisted approach.
Yep. Yeah. So you can engage. We don't have necessarily an interface that would be similar, or an experience that would be similar to ThreatLocker, but our EDR policies operate on that premise. So when you install our endpoint agents, you can choose different levels of I guess strictness. So you can go with like notify only, and that turns into a large feed that our team will consume and look for problems or threats. A balanced approach that includes some measure of blocking, and then an aggressive approach where we may unintentionally block something proactively. But if the connection between the machine and mothership is not there, it will still act very in I guess a responsible manner. Underneath the hood, we have a set of policies that run, and the tweaking or the customization of those policies are often an engagement with the MSP or on a per customer basis to match whatever the network is. So there's like that initial discovery, and then once we're both partner, customer, and us are happy with the policies, it gets deployed, and it has the the I guess a similar feature outcome as Threat Locker, with the addition of our approach will also work very well against living off the land attacks, which I talked about earlier, which is a much bigger threat than what applications are necessarily installed.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it sounds like a living off the land approach can get past the whitelisting approach because it's using what's already there. It's not like you're dropping some. So even using a platform like ThreatLocker, you're not just like 100% protected, which I think 5 years ago that was probably the feeling that most MSPs had.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to diminish Threat Locker. It's a great tool, and I know a lot of
Sure.
MSPs really like it. But the tough thing with living off the land is it's not, you can't really white or blacklist it. It is really comes down to the creativity of the attacker. So the heuristic model that you need to forward deploy on endpoints is considerable. And what I mean by that is if you have process A, start process B, start process C, and then D is the thing that seems weird. What that chain of processes looks like might be the actual determining factor as to whether process D is bad or not. So it's not necessarily about that endpoint thing that is starting, it's the history of how it got there.
I want to ask, somebody popped a question into the chat, so I'm going to ask this. Um, a lot of MSPs are misguiding their clients on cybersecurities. MSPs will sell the client an EDR only solution, leaving the network and a cloud attack surfaces vulnerable. Then, when an MSSP or cybersecurity expert comes in and the client is so convinced that the MSP has them covered that they don't listen to the facts, how can field effect help change their mind?
Um, I think the an opportunity to work with us and see what we can do is believing in the approach that we've taken. Um, it's the cybersecurity industry is tough because there's not really an authority that anybody can go and definitively say what that authority is saying about the industry is correct or not. Like MITRE is one thing that tries to do the best it can to gauge technologies. Same thing with industry analysts, but marketers are going to market. So how do you cut through that, right? And
So true.
the some of the best advice that we got from partners over the past year is, as a company, Field Effect should be doing anything it possibly can to get our solution in the hands of people. Because once you try it and see it and understand it, it will be like a light switch that goes off. This is where I was saying earlier, holistic cybersecurity is as much a philosophy as it is technology and a service on top of that. And seeing is believing, and that's generally the approach that we're trying to take.
What mistakes do you see MSPs making most often when evaluating new security options?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is technology. They look at the technology only and don't factor in how the managed component can actually negatively impact the outcome for the customer. So if you buy just an endpoint or just a cloud solution and there's nobody managing it, it doesn't work near as well. And I think this is actually one of the most brilliant things that the top five endpoint vendors have actually done. They've When you buy an endpoint on its own, if you don't have a team behind it, it's really not that effective. It could be the greatest technology, it could be the most upper right quadrant in Gartner technology, but it's really not effective at the end of the day for MSPs. But what the impression is that you're buying the level of effectiveness that you get when there's a team behind it. And if you do not have that team, then buying any technology is not going to work. The only way you will get a really good cybersecurity outcome for your customers is if there's a people component, a process component, technology component, and that's why MDR exists today, because it's ultimately the most effective way to deliver outcome for customers. So really, I guess to answer that succinctly is be honest about what actually good cybersecurity looks like.
What a great answer. Are there any metrics or KPIs that MSPs should be tracking to measure the impact of a cybersecurity platform?
Um, I think having a good understanding of what your human cost to delivering cybersecurity to customers actually looks like. So if you have 100 customers and you have a team of five, cybersecurity people on that, what can they do over time? How much effort is going in on a per customer basis? Understand those metrics because ultimately your efficiency is what is going to govern how effective you grow and the type of company you become over time. Um, that predictability is really important. The other thing I would say is, how does the threat surface look like for your customers? If at one point in time you're getting say 10 alerts a week on a customer, what are you doing to make the threat surface better to turn that into 2 alerts per week? If there's a reduction in vulnerabilities around the threat surface of your customer networks, then it's less effort for you, and then feeds into better tracking around that first point. So, um, I don't, the effort that would take per company is really dependent on your company. But my advice, if you wanted to become a security first MSP or make that a flagship feature, understanding the cost around that is ultimately what will help you make your business better over time.
How long does it typically take for an MSP from we'll say the ink dried on the contract that they signed with Field Effect to the product is implemented with their clients' endpoints and everything else?
Um, I think that that really depends on the MSP and the approach they want to take. We've had some partners that will dive in right out of the gates, and over the course of a couple weeks, have customers converted to using Field Effect. And the scenarios behind that are sometimes we sign a new partner because their old solution resulted in ransomware attacks, and they said, "All right, I'm dropping this entirely. We're bringing Field Effect in, and it's full customer saturation over a couple weeks." So it is possible to move that quickly. I think the record time with Covalence is signing up a new customer is within 7 minutes of the ink drying. We were detecting a problem on a network. That was a fun day. And hats off to the team on that one. But I would say, the more I think realistic outcome is when we sign a new partner on, we work with them to look at their customer space and where do you want to tackle first and where do we go from there. Like I can't stress enough how much we uh, uh, encourage the partnership approach. Like we are genuinely invested in helping your company be better, helping your customers be better, and that pace of you adopting Field Effect is ultimately up to you.
What resources or support options exist for MSPs who sign up with Field Effect?
So we have our customer success team, our support team, phenomenal groups of people. Our We have a whole knowledge base of articles about cybersecurity in general, a series of videos for onboarding and bringing new customers on, and how to manage your volume licenses. And I think a unique thing that I always get jazzed about is our partners, our existing partners, are always really willing to help new partners through that process as well. So, we're we're pondering the approach of how do we build a community of assistance and help around Covalence, because I think it's an opportunity that everybody would benefit from.
Where do you see the MSP cybersecurity space evolving to over the next 3 to 5 years?
Uh, I think it's inevitable that MSPs need to work to become an MSSP, perhaps not by definition, but to lead with cybersecurity. And that is we talked about compliance frameworks earlier, and I think those types of frameworks are ultimately going to be driving forces that push MSPs in that direction. You mentioned HIPAA. There's lots of different types of companies that have to comply to that. Well, how do they do that? And I think over time, as those types of frameworks become more prevalent in professional organizations or communities, the optionality will decrease. So it'll just have to be something that MSPs deal with. And I think there'll be, you know, some companies will embrace this evolution, and I think it's an opportunity personally. Being an entrepreneur for 15 years, what I've learned is that change in any industry or change that is coming, it is an opportunity, and you need to look at it that way. And I think if MSPs embrace that, it's success just staring us all right in the face.
Do you think there will be any new regulations uh, here in America or in Canada or anywhere else for that matter when it comes to anything with cybersecurity, whether it's new regulations that apply to all SMEs or um, I don't know, new punishments for MSPs that suck or whatever?
That's a great question. I don't follow too much in the U.S. as to what's coming and whatnot. You would think that in Europe they passed GDPR, which is a data privacy. I'm paraphrasing perhaps a little too simplistically, but it's a data privacy framework that requires companies to protect data and whatnot. There's been some discussion in Canada, but classic Canadian government can't really get their ducks in a row with that. So we'll see. But I think intuitively we'll get there. Um, there's I think a natural path to qualifying for cyber insurance around complying with particular frameworks. And whether it's CIS or ISO 27K, there's a varying degree of difficulty. But I think you're the thread you're pulling on there. There's something there. It's just a matter of time and how complex it looks like, really.
I agree. And one thing I want to touch on, and um, there's something serious that just came out in the last couple of days. The United States SEC charged SolarWinds
Mm.
and its CISO with, I want to say, fraud, like for misleading investors around all of their um, breaches and everything else. Um, do you think that this is something that will become more common?
Yeah, I think so. The transparency is underappreciated in the business world, and that trust factor. As the world moves to more and more connectivity and more data just being out there, how do you trust the services? What governs the ability to trust vendors that you work with? I could totally see this becoming something that's more frequently, or a framework for disclosure. And yeah, again, I think it'll happen. Again, just a matter of when.
My last question I have is, do you have one piece of advice for MSPs that are still relying on legacy siloed security tools today?
Yeah, evolve, embrace this opportunity to become a different type of security provider. Ultimately, the siloed approach will not work. Attackers will get around it, and evolution is a natural part of being better. And I encourage MSPs to take that journey. You won't regret it when you do. And yeah, please reach out to Field Effect if you want help with that journey. It's what gets us out of bed.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much. I I cheated a little bit, okay? I a couple weeks ago used artificial intelligence to analyze all of the information on your website, including a bunch of PDFs that I was able to download. So I believe I have a bulleted list of all the services that Field Effect offers. And by services, I mean it could all be part of Covalence. I'm just trying to break this down into different products that you're kind of replacing.
Mhm.
So the first one I see here is managed detection and response, and that includes 24/7 monitoring, threat hunting, detection, investigation, and response by field effect security analysts.
Yes.
Next is endpoint security, next gen antivirus, endpoint detection and response, application allow listing on endpoints. Network security with full packet capture network analysis, threat detection, microsegmentation, and protocol analysis.
Okay.
Cloud security, protection for Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Azure, AWS, including anomaly detection.
Yep. And there's about 15 other packages we integrate with.
Cool. Probably like Dropbox and
Yep.
Box and a few other things.
Yep. ServiceNow,
Vul-
Wise, and Autodesk, and
awesome.
yeah.
Vulnerability scanning, internal and external vulnerability scanning, and prioritized remediation recommendations.
Yep.
Security awareness training, interactive training for employees to avoid phishing, social engineering, and cyber threats.
Mhm.
Incident response, emergency expert investigation, containment, eradication, and recovery services. Virtual CISO, on demand strategic guidance on cybersecurity strategies, frameworks, policies, and more.
Yep.
Compliance services, assistance meeting compliance standards like PCI DSS, HIPAA, NERC, CIP, GDPR, and probably a whole slew of others.
Yep.
Phishing testing, customized phishing simulations to identify vulnerabilities.
Yep. That's a fun one.
Security policy review, audit and enhancement of security policies and procedures.
Yep.
Dark web monitoring, who doesn't offer that these days? Monitoring for compromised credentials and data on dark web sites.
Yep.
SIM log management, collection, correlation, and analysis of log data.
Mhm.
DNS filtering, we mentioned this earlier, blocking of malicious domains and filtering website access.
Yep.
Is there anything I didn't list?
Ooh.
That's a really awesome
Yeah.
and comprehensive list.
I think you got most of it. I'd love to crack open what we're building right now in the next 18 months, but I think my product team would hit me over the head with a 2x4, but there's more coming.
Well, please come back. Send your favorite guy to come back and do a demo of Covalence and everything that Field Effect has to offer. And anytime you want to come back and talk to us more about cybersecurity and teach MSPs how to do it better, please reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Matt. And thank you for those of you that watched live. I'll have the edited version uploaded tonight, tomorrow morning. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.